Very good. Sounds like Return of the Jedi or something. I guess it's Return of the Manure Monday. So welcome back, everybody. My name is Andrew Barry, and I'm with the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs. And on behalf of Christine Brown and myself, I would like to welcome you back to Manure Mondays, which for this year we're calling March Manure Mondays. Sticking with the M thing, I hope that this is a series that's marvelous, is meaningful, memorable, motivational, and well, you get the general idea. What's in store for this year? Well, we start today with sand-laden manure, and then we have three more, which will include manure spreading logistics, manure additives, and then finally composting bedded pack barns. So looking forward to a good series, some good speakers, and some good conversation. Few logistics before we jump fully in here. Please stay muted. We love to hear from you, but we don't want to hear from your dog, so please do stay muted. And we do want you to post questions and post comments in the chat. That's the best way for us to communicate, so please do that. To start and to get practiced, I'm going to ask that if you are a farmer who uses sand in your farming operation, please post that in the chat, where you are, what type of farm. If you are a researcher, government person, industry person, or whatever, and have had some involvement in terms of working with sand on farms, please then post that in the chat as well. For everybody else, I have a question for you, a quiz question that actually comes from our presenting speaker today. And here's the question. What is the swine industry using to clean pigs' legs in 2024? There's the question. What is the swine industry using to clean pigs' legs in 2024? Put your answers in the chat, and we'll ask our speaker later what the correct answer is. So a few quick logistics as we get going here. We will stop at the end of the hour, so 45 to 60 minutes will be our maximum, but we do record all of these sessions. And recording them allows you to circle back and visit it whenever you want. We even have previous year's recordings available there as well. So that is on the OMAFRA Field Crop News YouTube channel, and we will send out a link by email to let you know how to connect to that easily. We did get accredited for this session for one continuing education unit. So certified crop advisors, you can get one soil and water credit for today's session. We will have the QR code posted at the very end so that you can access it easily. If you do have a problem with the QR code, your name and your number sent to Christine Brown or myself will do the same trick. Okay, so again, please stay muted, but post your questions and comments in the chat. Okay, to get started, isn't it amazing? You know, this is March the 4th, and I live a couple of blocks from Lake Huron. So today on March the 4th, I can walk by, just wearing a t-shirt, walk down to the shores of Lake Huron and grab some sand from the beach with no ice, no snow, nothing else. That blows my mind. But anyhow, I do have a bag of sand here from the beach of Lake Huron. And I guess you see why people use this, why farmers are using this. I mean, I didn't today, but you can lay on the beach and it's actually quite comfortable. So there is definitely something to the fact that sand bedding is all about cow comfort, no question. You know, there's lots of benefits to it, but I guess when you look at this, you realize, wow, there is no structure there, no structure whatsoever. This is just inorganic material that is very, very gritty. And I know not all sands are the same, but boy, they can be hard on equipment. So just interesting. So I do want to take a couple minutes here, and I'm going to share a presentation and just go through a few slides. Basically, you know, we talk about the fact that cow comfort is definitely a big part of what we're talking about here. So farmers in Ontario, we have some farmers that have been using this for up to 10 years. Others that are quite interested in it because of the benefits. And okay, so in Ontario, basically we manage it. We use stand lanes, we use pit crawlers, to mix the sand, with the manure, agitate it. We drop excavators down in the tanks to pull the sand out after the liquid has been removed. And it has to be managed because there's some real challenges to this. The sand, some of the challenges that we think of are, take crusting, for example. Sand does not make a good crust on the pit. So you've got more issues with greenhouse gas release. You've got more issues with odor. The sand takes up space, so it's going to reduce your storage volume. And as we'll show in a minute, it definitely affects the soil conditions when you're applying it to your field. So this slide you're looking at here, main thing I want to point out, this was a slide from a project in Ontario. Christine Brown and a couple other colleagues were involved in this a number of years ago. And we've got the percent dry matter against the percent sand. And the first thing to note is how strong a correlation there is between those two. So the dots are all very close to the line. If we take as an example, the yellow lines there showing 10% dry matter, a 10% dry matter content we found had about a 5% sand content. Putting that into context, if you are applying liquid manure and at that 5%, you have got 500 pounds of sand. So next slide, please, Christine. So that is a lot of sand that you're having to deal with. This just shows some other dry matter percentages. If we go down and look at a solid manure, so for example, they're 35% dry matter. Look at the percent sand content in that, over 25, which when you drill down to the actual material, 510 pounds of sand per ton. The next slide, Christine, please. Just a few points on that. Practically, where does that sand end up? Well, it ends up usually in the fields closest to the storage, because that's material that you don't want to travel too far with that, so it gets applied close to the storage. So those areas tend to build up the sand content. And what does it do? Well, it affects the organic matter content. So you can have a lower organic matter content, which then, as you know, is going to affect your water holding capacity. It's going to affect the structure of your soil, which in turn can increase the compaction risk. It also can reduce cation exchange capacity because of the amount of sand that is there. So again, putting this in perspective, if you think an average sand bedded solid manure at 38% dry matter, that's 560 pounds of sand per ton of manure. And so if we end up with 20% sand in the top 3 inches or 7.5 centimeters of soil, what's the actual volume? Well, that's 350 tons of sand per acre. So that definitely is changing the profile and the texture of your sand in that top few inches. How long would it take to do that? Well, at a 40 ton per acre application, that's 9 years. And at a 30 ton per acre, that's 12 years. And as I mentioned, in Ontario, we have some farms that have been doing this for 10 years or more. They are seeing this happen. Next slide, please, Christine. So this is a video that we just want to show you some of. It features Dr. Francis Arriaga, and not going to show the whole video. So I want to show the last 3 minutes of it. So Christine, if you're able to grab that.
Thing that happens is that if you have abrupt changes in textural classes anywhere in the soil profile, that actually will impede water movement through a soil profile, the drainage capacity of the soil. So if you go from a layer that has coarser texture, let's say by adding sand to it, and then all of a sudden you go to another layer that has a finer texture, that abrupt change is actually going to affect the infiltration capacity, the drainage capacity of that soil.
Sandbedding started in 1996 for us. So we've been on it for 21 years, putting sand onto our cropland. The organic content where we've seen is starting to fall because of the fact that we became strictly a milk cow dairy. To be able to have water holding capacity is to be able to build organic matter. When we put the sand out there, and it's very inorganic, so we're not building organic matter by putting that sand on there.
So sand is just basically silicon oxide, fairly inert material. So it doesn't really provide any nutritional value to the soil in that it doesn't provide any minerals. The other thing too is that it has very low to no charge. So it has a very low nutrient holding capacity.
When our sand, silt, and clay particles are no longer swimming in a sea of organic matter, all you have then is a brick.
So as you're putting that sand bedding in the field over time, that could lead to changes in the texture of the soil. So you're basically changing the proportion of sand, silt, and clay particles in the soil. That determines a lot of the chemical properties of the soil, physical properties of the soil, and in turn then also affects the biology of the soil. When we start making those changes in the texture of the soil, that could have some impacts long term. How long for that would take, it depends on the amount of sand that is put in the soil, but it could lead to some other effects such as changing the infiltration capacity of the soil, the water holding capacity, and the drainage capacity of the soil.
Water infiltration is everything if you believe at all that we have a runoff problem in this country. I do believe our producers know there's a soil issue, and they're making strides to try to reduce their physical impact.
If you add large amounts of sand to the soil where you're actually changing the textural class of their soil, you will be affecting the aggregation of that soil and the porosity of that soil. Not only the total porosity, but also the pore size distribution. And those changes can affect infiltration capacity. And then as you look at the soil again, they could create an abrupt change on texture from one layer, surface layer, to the bottom layers that actually will impede infiltration, and redistribution of the profile will slow it down.
The reason to get away from sand would just strictly be agronomic reasons. It's getting to the point where it's kind of difficult for that to fit in. We're looking at other ways that we can still have a very comfortable cow and not sacrifice anything on that end, and being able to satisfy our agronomic needs that we have here in the field.
Okay, very good. So just some background to set the stage on this whole topic. And so now I'm pleased to introduce our presenter today, and his name is Mark Mish. Mark is a farm boy himself from Wisconsin, and he spent his career in the dairy industry. He actually told me, though, that he's known as a waterbed salesman. And so you could go a couple of ways on that, but we'll link it with the dairy industry and assume that that's where he was selling waterbeds, which means he's had some experience in terms of sand and sand-bedded operations. So, Mark, we're thrilled to have you as part of this today, and go through your presentation. We did lose our tech person, so I'm going to have to just
I'm
find
back.
Oh, you're back? Okay. So if you could pull up
Yeah,
Mark's
my internet went
presentation.
down, so I had to hotspot, but I am back.
Okay, very good. So we'll pull that up, and then Mark, we'll turn it over to you.
Okay. So just a couple things. You can see the video of that infiltration going on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, I've got pictures, and it shows like we're pouring it in at 1019. And if you look at the left-hand side first, on the glass to the right, the cylinder to the right, it's a little bit whiter on the top 3 inches. And what we're doing there is we're trying to mimic the idea that in vertical tillage, we're just mixing the top 3 inches, and we're taking out roughly 18,000 pounds a year from each stall. That's what is recommended, 50 pounds per cow per day. And as we do that, we're adding to the soil, we're diminishing our amount of organic matter. And so what does that do for us? That's the end product. For each 1% of organic matter we lose by doing that, we lose 13,000 gallons of water holding capacity. Also, sand has a cation exchange of 10. Organic matter is around 250. So around 25 times more ability to hold phosphorus and other nutrients that you've paid for and that we do not want being transported off the field. If you look at the middle picture in the 3-picture frame there, that's about where we are now. We're not quite there, but you see there's a lot of water sitting on top, and when it's sitting on top, that's runoff. And so not only are we're gonna lose by erosion, but we're also going to be losing some of those nutrients. And so that's really the point here, is that it is not a good soil amendment. And so we need, if we can do something about that, would be great. That QR code on this particular slide is the video that you're looking at. So you can go to the next slide. If these fellows were putting that much sand on your soil, we'd have a problem with that. But we in the Midwest here, we have several people that do this all the time, and we don't want to be doing this. So, again, the point is see what we can do about not putting sand out on our soils. Next. So for this discussion today, I listed out a lot of the issues that come up on a regular basis when we're out talking to farmers about our Sternholm sand separation system. And we'll kind of go through those one by one. I want to start, go to the next slide. I want to start by just kind of go through the system kind of quickly for you, and then we'll follow through here. So on the left, we have a picture of two piston pumps that are pumping in manure from a raw manure tank that's just outside the wall here. That tank is 12 feet deep, and what we're doing in there is we're trying to mix up the manure so it's a homogeneous manure solution that we can put through the system. As it goes through the system, it goes from the piston pumps, it'll go up to the macerator. The macerator is our gatekeeper for the system. It's going to keep out the hoof blocks. It's going to keep out the ear tags, any kind of debris that we don't want going through the system. That's where it's either going to get ground up or it's going to be deposited in the bottom of that macerator. After that, it goes to the flow meter, and the flow meter goes to the percent solids meter. This percent solids meter is just trying to tell you how dense, how much material is going through, and it's communicating with the flow meter as to what speed we should be doing that. Next slide. If it's too thick, it'll go back to the raw manure tank and be diluted. If it's just right, then it goes up to the cyclone, and that's kind of the black piece up by the C, the capital C up there. And it's a centrifugal force, pushes the sand to the outside. Up through the center of the cyclone goes an updraft, which takes the manure and the solids over to the raw manure tank, or to the rotary drum, and that's that line that's going up through the E. As the sand drops into the tank, then the tank has water being pushed up from underneath and cleaning that sand. And as it gets to the bottom, it goes up the augers. It goes up one auger at a time. And so like the first auger, it'll run for maybe 8 seconds and stop. Then it goes to the second auger, stops, third auger. And meanwhile, the first auger is dewatering. The water is trickling back down that auger toward the tank. Next slide, please. Can you embellish that? Can you make that a little bigger? So the sand, if you can see that, it's very, very small. And so we're just looking at, it's got to be a specific sand to go in this system. You can't put diesel fuel in a gas tank or vice versa. And so this is a specific sand. It's between 150 and 700 microns. It's very hard, and it's round. And so you can look at a comparison like a Sand-laden, the Sternholm in the middle, and then another system on the right. And you can see the size of the particles in comparison. Some of the qualities of this sand make it less abrasive, less wear on your equipment. That round is good. It has a consistent fall rate. It's got a certain bulk density, so we've sized it so that it drops, so we get very good separation. Round sand, it'll drain very well, and organic matter can't stick in the crevices or in the crags. So it releases the organic matter very well, and it's extremely comfortable for the cows. Okay. So this is a daily log from Trillium here, Old Dairy, and you'll be talking to Mike later on here. But basically every day he goes out and he checks to see how efficient, how well things are going. And he's getting out between 99, 98, and he's got 95 there. That was an extremely warm day, lots of sprinklers going, but then right back up 98, 99 all the way through. And that's a pretty consistent That's a pretty consistent drumbeat at that dairy. Next, please. The target goals we're looking for is 95 to 96% dry matter, 1 to 2% organic matter is great. Gram negative and strep are under 1 million, coliform and Klebsiella under 100,000. And in July, it's very hard to see here for me, but in July we were looking at 96% dry matter, 1% organic matter, 156 on gram negative, 2,600 on coliform. 125 just means they couldn't find any, and then strep was 32,000. We did the same test again in December, and there we came up with 95% dry matter, 1% organic matter, 1,300 gram negative, and then 20,000 in strep. So, extremely clean, extremely good for the cows. In a tour we did last month, Ben was saying that they had like 2 to 4 cows with mastitis in the last 3 months, 2 to 4 each month over the last 3 months. And so it makes for a very good bedding for the cows. Next slide, please. There's more than a few reasons to look at this system. We had a person come up to the booth at one of the shows, and he said he was just about to purchase a system that was going to take about 800 amps to run it. Lots of pumps and motors running and that sort of thing. And our system runs on about 80 amps. So I just compared the two of them with his electric rate. Your electric rate might be 7 cents a kilowatt hour. It might be 15 cents a kilowatt hour. His was around 12 cents. And in his case, it was $310,000 difference in a year's usage. Next slide, please. These are the folks at Trillium Hill Dairy. And one of the questions that's come up fairly regularly is what is the fresh water usage? During that tour, we did the calculations here. This is what it was back last month, 7,680 gallons per day, or 3.4 gallons per cow per day. We are working with all of our dairies right now, doing different things to clean water, to utilize parlor water or something from the milk house, and or even clean our own wastewater from this system in order to get down to a goal. Our goal is to get down to one gallon per cow per day. Next slide, please. As a building, this is their building, the digester to the right there. The building is 120 by 60 wide, 22 feet tall. The 22 feet tall is mainly so we can get the augers in and out and that sort of thing. The little building to the right of those pickup trucks there, that's going to be kind of the center point of this. There's going to be a second system going in here, so basically doubling that size. So let's go inside that building and just see how it breaks down. Like so the sand separation room is about 40 feet long, 60 feet wide. The sand storage room, 80 feet long, 60 feet wide. And the 60 feet may not need to be quite that wide, but it certainly makes a big difference when you're in there with the big end loader moving around. So that's one of the big reasons for the 60 feet wide, but nice, and not a giant area to have to keep a track of. So next slide, please. Smell, it's not quite as good as Luigi's stew there, but everything is enclosed. There are a couple of manure tanks. The sand-free manure is under the rotary drum, which is to the left, and then there's a liquid manure tank on the right there, on the left, excuse me, and that is covered up with mats, and so that's, again, there is a smell, but not very much, fairly faint. Next, please. In that room, there's going to be a control panel there, and it basically telling you exactly what's going on. It tells us which one of the piston pumps is going down at that point in time. It tells us which motors are working, all that sort of thing. If there is something that would go wrong, a motor that would go bad or something like that, it would automatically turn red, and then we know exactly where it is. One of the neat things I think in this whole system is they have a thing called trends, and you could watch maybe the motor that runs the rotary drum, and it's got a very consistent, pattern, very tight, very tight. And if all of a sudden it starts to get spiking up and down or something like that, we can notice that, and we can automatically go there and check, and maybe it's a bearing going out or something like that. And again, this is in the sand room. It's also on the phone of the owner. It's also at our dealership. It's also in Denmark. So somebody can be watching this thing from several different places, and it can be adjusted. Maybe we want our raw manure tank not to be so full. We can adjust that. Those are things we can adjust on the fly. Next slide, please. As far as maintenance, this is 2,250 cows that are going into this. 1,900 is the milking group. Scheduled maintenance, currently we're doing about 6 hours every 2 weeks. Someone goes and pulls all the pumps, checks all the props, all that sort of thing, and looks at the macerator, goes through the cyclone. And so that's what we're doing right now. We've been doing it probably more often than we maybe need to, being in the first year here, to make sure that everything is, how things wear, so that we understand it really well. That's something we're going to be reviewing as time goes on here. Trillium Hill spends about 30 minutes per day with maintenance, moving the sand, doing their tests, that sort of thing. Our repair estimates were going to be $15,000 to $20,000 per year. Things like stirring props, the macerator cone. I think when I was there in February, they were around 12,000 at that point. Next slide, please. Very durable over time. They've been in Denmark for 26 years in wastewater treatment plants, 10 years in a 2,500 cow dairy. In that dairy, they pulled it all apart last summer. And there was like one part that they expect about another 5 to 7 years will be the first major part. Things like macerator blade or a prop, those are things that are probably the normal wear and tear. But as far as something major, no major repairs on that unit in 10 years. As I know it, there hasn't been a single one of those augers replaced since they started using them. So next slide, please. One of the big things, one of the big reasons why it's so much interest this year is digester compatibility. So in the past, folks had sand and they didn't want to change from sand. They were happy, they understood how to do it, and they're very successful with it. Digester folks really weren't so excited about sand because it filled up their digester. They had to stop, they had to clean out. Maybe it got too much water in there, and now they're not getting as much gas. In this case, we're getting right around that 9% plus solids and 58 to 64%, depending on the time of year and that sort of thing. So digester folks are very happy with that, and we're working with several of them right now in order to incorporate that into their system. Next slide. Cow comfort, again, very, very nice. Never really been debated, and especially this fine sand. It's very nice for those cows to lie on. Next. Something down the road to keep in mind is that we can run the sand through the stern home, separate that. Then we go through the digester, and at some point, maybe you want to do something with some heifers. You want to bed some heifers, so you can run it through a slope screen, through a screw press, and then there's a thing called a quality bedding machine that we have worked with nowadays, and it's basically a pizza oven. It's a conveyor where we spread out the solids after it's come out of the separator. It's about a 450-degree oven, so it's killing all the bacteria. And then when it comes out the other end, we're coming out with for the dairy that's been working with the most, they're around 70% dry matter. And that's quite high in dry matter, but it's because they aren't breaking it up. It goes through there without a lot of disturbance, maybe different from like a triple bypass blowing system or something like that. Next question, or next slide, please. I guess that's all I have for you right now. I'm sure Dave and Mike can add to or answer any questions you got at this point, Andrew.
Absolutely. So folks, once again, you have questions, post them in the chat and we'll pull those forward. We'll get Mike and Monty pulled up here as well. We'll spotlight them on the screen to answer questions. But Mark, first for you, just kind of some big picture questions. So this technology, I'm guessing, came from Europe initially. Is it used broadly in Europe?
I'm just going to have Dave, because Dave's got more experience with it. I'll just have Dave answer that stuff.
Yep.
He's
Okay, Dave,
Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah, hi, Dave June here. I'm managing partner of Mac Contractors. I was the one that actually flew over to Denmark. We signed a dealership agreement with them. So yeah, in Denmark, they're about 8 years ahead of us as far as digesters, and over there, it is required by their government that any dairy farm that is producing milk and manure, all manure needs to go to digesters. So 10 years ago, the dairy industry went to Sternholm and said, hey, we see this working excellent in the wastewater. Can you help us out on the dairy? We don't want to switch off sand. So their technology is pretty advanced. Digesters are part of their everyday life over there. And now bringing it to the U.S., they saw a great opportunity, and it is working extremely well here. It's really a game changer in the whole sand industry, being able to separate that fine sand. So,
Excellent. Okay, good. So your company then, how long have you had this technology in the U.S.?
yeah, so right now, technically, it's been 3 years since we signed up with them. We brought 2 units over right away, put them at 2 different dairies. Trillium Hill was one of them. And we wanted to make sure that we got all the kinks, and how we feed dairy cows in the U.S. and how we stock density in the U.S. is quite different than over in the country of Denmark. So I didn't want to go out and sell a bunch of these and make sure that, it wasn't successful. And Trillium Hill has been an awesome partner with us on making sure that we're getting all the tweaks. Just like Mark said on the fresh water, it was a little bit more than what we anticipated, but I can tell you in the last 2 months, Mike and our team have joined together, and we got some big resolutions to really get that water usage down. But the quality of sand, and I want Mike to speak on this, is incredible. It's exceeded our expectations on cow comfort, maintenance, electric costs. It's really, like I said, been a game changer in the dairy industry.
Well, let's go. Mike and Monty, we appreciate you guys joining us, and we want to hear the farmer perspective. We know these guys are selling stuff, so we want to hear the real deal from you. Maybe back up a little bit, just put your farm in perspective. I'm in Ontario, and when we hear 2,200 cows, that's a big farm. We might have a couple of those in the country. Like we're much smaller dairy industry. So put in perspective your farm and kind of the history, sand bedding, and then to this, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, so we about 2,200 milking and dry right now, and before we put in the separator, we were just virgin sand that would go out into a manure pit and get hauled out to the fields. And then started looking and working with a digester company, and we didn't really want to go off sand. And the timing just happened to work out that Sternholm had just come into the country, and kind of talked to those boys for about 2 or 3 months, kind of got comfortable with it and pulled the trigger on it. Did the install, like Dave alluded to, the first couple months, just working out some of the kinks, some of the bugs. And I'd say since about June now, it's been running pretty flawlessly.
So sand, you've been using sand for a while, like even previous to this, is that true?
Yeah, we've been on virgin sand since 2015.
Okay. And I noticed just in the chat, Chris Brown has posted there for your interest some links in Ontario to silica sand. We are talking about silica sand, which is not Lake Huron beach sand that I brought in this morning. One of you guys, Mark or Dave, maybe you're the ones to comment. Can you just elaborate on that a little bit in terms of the type of sand and issues around sand?
Yeah, so one of the things that I really learned, I learned a lot about sand when we brought this on. And, you know, it was really hard for me because I had been dealing with sand separation systems for probably 15 years. And it's like, oh, sand is sand, right? But here, what I learned about it with the silica sand is that is probably the most natural occurring brown sand that there is. And another major benefit of it is when sand is round like that, if you just tap it, the water sheds off it very, very easy. And then when it's getting pumped through the system, because it's round, it doesn't have the wear characteristics. The other benefits of this sand is this silica sand has a hardness scale to it. And if you were to put it, it's called the Mohs scale, and 9 is like a diamond. This is a 7. So as the cows are stepping on it on the concrete, it's not going to break down into a finer sand that we can't separate. And Mike can contest to this on how many loads a year he's bought from our sand separation. But also another key factor is there's no iron in this sand. So as the sand is sitting in the stalls and your divider loops or headlocks or, you know, dragging it up into the parlor, it doesn't have any rust characteristics, so it won't promote rust throughout the dairy too. So, but the big keys, like I said, are it really sheds the water off, and like Mark said, because it's round, it doesn't hold on to the organic matter either.
So Mike, can you comment on that? Because I'm wondering, did you have to change sand suppliers from what you were using before to now? And what have you seen in terms of any impacts in the barn and concerns about future supply, that sort of thing? Can you comment on that?
Yeah, no, we cleaned out all of the old sand, cleaned everything out by hand, and then we put all new sand in. And that's part of what just made sense to us is the sand systems we had in the States before it was pea gravel all the way down to dust. And the name of the game is consistency. So if you have a very consistent sand, you can get a system that'll separate it, which is why we're getting the results we're getting.
So again, in Ontario, farmers I've talked to that are using sand, they get concerned at times about long-term supply. There are challenges sometimes about getting supply, about transportation costs. Mike, comments on that?
Well, we're doing about 98, 99% through the system, but since we happen to have a digester here too, eventually 5, 7, 8, 10 years, not sure when, but they'll have to clean 2% of the sand will slowly build up. So essentially for us, that's like 100% reclamation in my eyes, because when we clean the digester out, we can just pile it up, let it get cleaned with the rainwater, and then start using it again. So we're in a little bit of a unique situation since we almost have like a second settling tank, if you will.
So
Go ahead. And I can comment to that too. I talked to several of the sand plants that I get asked that question all the time. You know, how big are the pits? How long do we have this? All the sand plants in the U.S. that we've been talking to say that this portion of the sand that we're using, there's not a lot of companies out there that need it or want it. So they said on average, they know that they got 400 to 500 years worth of sand available to it. There's some areas in the U.S. that do not have the sand. We're working in South Dakota right now, going to install a couple of units. We're trucking it out of Minnesota, and everybody's like, holy cow, that's quite a distance, right? But what we've been able to find is the sand out of these sand plants, it's dried. So we can haul them in hopper bottoms, which then they can backhaul other loads. another dairy in New York. We're gonna rail sand over there to do it. It is the initial upfront cost on it, but with the retention rate that we're doing, Mike, have you bought any loads yet this year? And it's been almost a year.
Yeah, the only loads we bought was just the first couple of months working through those kinks. And now it's been pretty seamless.
I think a good way to look at it, Andrew, would be if you didn't have any separation, 50 pounds per cow per day. And if you're losing 2%, that would be 1 pound. And so it'd be 1/50th. So if, let's say you're bringing in 10 loads a week now, you'd be bringing in maybe 10 loads a year if it really ends up being that all the way through the year, because it'd be 1/50th, 150.
And one interesting thing that actually Mike brought up to us is what a lot of farms don't realize is they bring in a lot of organic matter into it. We're mowing hay a lot lower, so we're getting more ash content into it. You have all the silage trucks bringing, in off their tires onto the pads, which do it. If the sand is 150 micron and bigger, we actually pull it out. What's interesting when you look at Mike's, part of our organic matter that we're actually separating is we saw some black specks in the sand, and it actually ends up being the canola that the cow did not process. It's perfectly the same size as our sand, so we see little black specks through the sand. But yeah, our bacteria counts have been wonderful. And, Mike, if you want to just talk a little bit about your cell counts and everything.
I grab Monty here. He does all our vet work. He can talk kind of about quality and herd health and whatnot.
Yeah, cell count's been running anywhere from 89 to 100,000 on a barn that we keep stocked decently. And our last cell counts seem to stay about steady. We ran last year for the 1,900 cows. We ran 69 cases of mastitis total for the year that were treated on 1,900 cows. And we wouldn't have had even 69 if we wouldn't have had to work the kinks out of the system to start with. And that was a switch over of sand. So bedding quality, organic matter, like Dave and Mark said, has been very, very low. And so a lot of times we see the organic matter less in this sand than we do in pit run sand. And then the bacterial counts, both off the separator directly, some of the counts I ran back in August, I brought some paperwork up just to look at them, but back in August, when I looked at direct, we only had 18,000 strep per gram, and we only had 2,000 coliform per gram. And if we let the pile set for just a day or two, those numbers start to actually go down. And so we can either take and bed directly off the auger, and those numbers are usually lower than a lot of pit run sand that I see in the area.
Just want to circle back to the thanks, Monty. Appreciate that, by the way. Circle back, Dave, in terms of the supply of the sand. I don't know if you see in the chat there, somebody's posting that silica sand, they understand, is used in the fracking industry. And as that industry explodes, do you have concerns about potential future supply?
Yeah, so actually in the fracking industry, they'll take the particles out of the sand and use that for the fracking. They need it to pack really tight in the fracking industry. And ours is round. The dairies, and I know Mike does, they don't groom their stalls because the sand does not compact down. So it's the other part of that in the fracking industry that they're actually using and sending, in that sand that we have, they really don't have a source for it. So we've been able to negotiate some fairly good prices to buy this sand at, and it's super consistent because through these sand plants, it's not just a screener they're using, they're actually using a classifier to get that size tolerance in that nice tight window that we're looking for on it.
Mike, you mentioned the canola, and that makes me think, boy, maybe there's an opportunity there for some good Canadian canola to slide in and be a part of this too. let's talk about the system, okay? The costs. And again, I want to say to folks, just remember, we're talking about one technology today, and we're highlighting this to have the conversation. This is an industry that's growing. There's new stuff coming, and this was recently highlighted actually in Ontario. There was a meeting here with Grand River Fortifiers, and that's where we became aware of it and wanted to bring it to the table for discussion. But let's put it in perspective. What are we looking at in terms of system costs overall, the size of farm that you're going to need to be able to warrant this type of system?
Yeah, so let's talk about capacity of the unit. So the main tub of the unit is set in stone. Each auger is consistent and can handle about 550 to 600 cows per auger. So that's a nice part of this system. If you're 500 cows, we put one auger in. But the nice part is, say you increase on your cow numbers. We go to 1,000, we add a second auger, and then we increase the run time all the way up to 4 augers, and then we can handle 2,500 cows right around there. On the base unit, and like what a lot of people ask me is a plug and play system. You know, give me a building, give me the all works, all in. You're going to be around anywhere from 2 million to 2.6, depending on the size of the building, how we get the manure to our reception tank. There's a lot of logistics that play into that, but that gives you just some ballpark numbers on it.
So do you have any, what would be the smallest farm that you have with the system? And is there any possibility for cooperative type venture or community-based venture or anything like that, either here or in Europe? Or
yeah,
just curious.
Well, what we're seeing in the U.S., let's go down the digester route here for a minute. The digesters are ecstatic with our system. There wasn't a lot of data to show, hey, are we better than any other sand separation system? How do we compare to green bedding? Well, what we're learning is that we're about 8 to 10% higher than any other sand separation system. And why the reason that is because we use very little fresh water. So we're giving them a very consistent, thick product to the digester. That is one of the main key reasons why that. So with digesters coming in, they're actually promoting, at least in the US, that they're help funding the sand separation because they don't want the sand in their digester and they want a consistent product. So right now there's a big push that they're help donating money towards the sand separation system. And then by having that thick product, the dairy will actually get more kickback on gas because we're making more natural gas with it.
Maybe just an idea there too, Andrew, is that when you're starting with a digester, most digester companies are not going to start talking to us until it's at least 2,000 to 3,000 cows and on up. So, for the smaller ones, like, 1,500, 1,000 or under, there probably isn't that.
Well, and let's talk size numbers. Over in Denmark, the smallest one they got it on is 250 cows over there. But again, that's going to the digester. What we're seeing happening now too is starting to take 3-4 farms and generating enough cow numbers for the digesters. And by doing that, that we can sand separate at each dairy, but then all the manure gets pumped or hauled to one location for a digester. So that's kind of the model that they're doing over in Europe. Is basically these trucks are coming out, you get the sand out of it, we'll haul the manure to the digester and then bring you back digestate when we do that. And that seems to be working really, really well.
Interesting. Mike, I want to circle back to you again, just on, so in Mark's presentation, he talked about there's some management, there's some maintenance, it takes some time. How do you find that in terms of adding more? I know you added the digester, that adds some management. You added this as well. How is it working in terms of labor, managing and maintenance?
Yeah, so with the sand separator, we haven't added any labor to manage it. Because you'll have a day where you might be back there a little longer, but I'd say your average day is about 30 minutes. Moving the sand and then pulling your samples it's kind of a surveillance program just to make sure everything's running the way it's supposed to be running. And then, then you just kind of do your basic checks over the machine, check your piston pumps, your agitators, make sure everything's running correctly. And then, you got to put in rubber coated agitator blades, which I would actually do on virgin sand because you get a lot better life out of the agitators. But the nice part with that is instead of having to buy a new agitator blade every time, you just switch it out and you get it re-rubberized. So that was kind of something we learned with this system also. But so no, we haven't really added any labor. Once we kind of fine tuned it and worked out some of the bugs, it's been a nice addition to the dairy.
Very good.
Mike, could you add about the the control on your telephone? How much do you use that, or do you use that?
Yeah, that's so the system has right now, I believe they're working on an app system, but right now it'll send you an email, which I have on my phone. So if it shuts down for any reason, it'll actually send you an email saying that it has a problem. So then you can actually just pull it up on your phone, see what's going on with it, and either you can fix it from your phone if it was something silly, or you just run back there, see what's going on and get it going. And then otherwise if you're chopping corn or you're busy, you can just pull it up on your phone, peek at it, see that everything's kind of running appropriately, and you might not make it back there that day, but I usually don't like to tell people that.
How many hours a day does your system run?
Yeah, our system runs about 18 hours a day, 19 hours a day, depending on manure volume coming back to it. It's all automatic, so all the barns pump back with sonars and everything. We don't have to do anything. So it feeds it turns on, shuts down by itself. So when it's out of manure, it shuts down. When it has manure again, it fires back up and starts separating sand.
Perfect. We're just about out of time here, guys. Any final comments, Mark, Dave, you wanna make? Or
Yeah, so probably one thing that I want to add to it, you had asked on, payback. Right now, we can comfortably say 10 years for sure that you can amortize this over with your bankers to say, does it justify or make sense for the dairy? We feel it could get all the way up to 15 to 20 years of life out of it. And when it comes to that, what we're seeing is everything moves so slow in the system. So it's not going to be $100,000 repairs. It's going to be very, small repairs when we come to that point. So I think there's a lot of opportunity when it comes to that size of that dairy.
very good. I think we got to end it there. I just want to point out one thing in the chat. Carl, thank you for posting that. He's got a link there to shawresources.ca with some information on what actually the difference is between silica sand and others. So that might be an interesting thing to check out for those that is new for. But I do want to say appreciation, Mark and Dave, both from Mac Contractors. Appreciate your time here, guys. And Mike and Monty from the farm. Glad things are going well and appreciate you joining us here today. And I'm going to ask Christine to post the QR code for those who are certified crop advisors. Just as we're doing that, one more question, Mark. Is there anybody that would be an Ontario contact for your company?
As of right now, the only little bit of downfall is that Sternholm is a very small company. I'm basically been selling them as quick as they can manufacture them. We just had a meeting literally last week about increasing production and being able, because we're getting calls from a lot of areas. So we are currently working on that. Sternholm does have a plan to increase production. As of right now, I can be the main contact for any dairies when it comes to questions and, planning for the future here for them if they want a unit.
Excellent. Appreciate that, Dave. So again, the QR code there for certified crop advisors. Reminder, this was recorded. So if you missed some of it or want to circle back to it, we will, when we send the emails out for the upcoming sessions, include a link to Omafra's Field Crop News YouTube channel. That's where these are all posted, so you can see that information again. Next week, we're back here at the same time, and we're looking at manure spreading logistics. I think you'll find it very interesting. We have some Ontario custom applicators who are really going to go through the numbers, the dollars and the cents of how you apply manure and managing your time and your equipment to be the most efficient. I think you'll find that very, very practical. So thank you to everybody. Thanks to the team in the background helping today, and especially to Mark and Dave, Mike and Monty. Wish everybody the best in the rest of the week, and take care.
Thank you.
Thanks.